Hello and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices with Nandagopal Rajan. Again, we have this promise that we will bring you somebody new, something new to learn about. And it's all about knowledge, right? And in that space, though all of us use a lot of smartphones and maybe you guys don't use a lot of smartphones. I use a lot of smartphones because I have to review a lot of them. But everybody uses smartphones all the time. We don't look at it that way, but it's maybe that one thing that's on us literally all the time through the day, through the week, through the month. But do we know really enough about it? Do we know where the segment is headed? And and we thought maybe we'll have a conversation on that topic after a long time and figure out what's happening in the smartphone space. And who better to talk about it than Damyant Singh Khanoria, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at OPPO India. And as you know, OPPO is one of the biggest players in this space in India, across the world. So Damyant, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nandagopal. Pleasure being here.
So Damyant, there is a lot of conversation usually around specs and all of that. But from if you have a bird's eye view of the smartphone segment right now or the industry right now, what are the things that are most exciting, for a company like OPPO?
Yeah. So Nandagopal, it's a very broad question you start with, and but it's a good one, right?
I'll narrow it down later.
Yeah, but it's a good one because smartphones have become so ubiquitous. It's become like literally all of us have kind of gotten used to using smartphones in our daily life. And just to simplify things a little bit, there are 5, maybe 6 key components of what constitutes a great smartphone experience, right? And I think obviously the first thing that all of us look for in a smartphone is obviously the camera, right? I mean, it's literally the number one driver of purchase. And there are various ways to kind of look at how cameras become such an important part of the smartphone experience. If you look at, for example, the bill of materials of any smartphone in the market, a large chunk of the money that's being put into the product from a pure hardware standpoint tends to be, the camera element, the camera hardware, so to speak. So, that's one really, really critical element. And that's something that's really kind of driven us at OPPO as well, in pushing the boundaries. For the longest time, you were the portrait expert. That's kind of what got OPPO its beachhead, so to speak, in India. The great selfie experience, great camera experience was what really drove OPPO's visibility in the beginning. But consumers really are rallying around the notion of having an amazingly capable device in their pockets. And there's a popular saying in the smartphone industry about the best camera is the one that you have on you at the moment. And that's really what's driving people being so focused around capturing memories and becoming creators of sorts on their own. So that's one really critical element. I would say literally the number one driver of purchase. The second, and I think this second element is something which is going to evolve and grow, is really around connectivity, right? And 5G is obviously, has been for the last few years the talk of the town in terms of what it will represent in how we experience and interact with the world around us. It's not to say that the smartphone is the device that will unlock the power of 5G. I think there is going to be a magical device that comes in the future. I don't think the smartphone really unlocks everything that 5G is capable of delivering. But that's another very, very important element, because what 5G allows you to do is obviously delivers faster speeds and delivers lower latency than 4G. But the use cases really are right now fairly few and far between. It's a better gaming experience. It's probably AR and VR, but we're not really kind of using AR and VR at scale on smartphones yet. So I think 5G connectivity is important, but right now 5G on smartphones is a bit like trying to drink water from a fire hose, right? I mean, there's just so much data
happening.
There's so much happening, but it's not possible for you to leverage everything with a smartphone.
Everything. Yes.
So that's the second critical element, because consumers have rallied around the notion of wanting to own a 5G phone, right? So that's obviously something which we're seeing increasingly in the purchase patterns. People are are kind of moving away from 4G devices. Although 4G devices are as capable given the penetration of 5G right now, but we do see that as being a second critical factor. The third one, which Indian consumers absolutely love, is the notion of performance and just processing power. So it's obviously a key driver of how a smartphone performs, not just at the time you unbox a device, but also increasingly with improved OS. Really, how long does your device kind of perform at its optimal level, right? So that's another very important element, which is not just linked to the hardware that you kind of put into the phone, but also how do you kind of keep the phone young and alive for increasingly longer periods of time. So that's again something which is important for Indian consumers, because it's one of 3 or 4 things that you ask in a store. Processing power kitni hai? So they might not necessarily understand everything, but as long as the number is high, they're happy, right?
It is a smartphone version of kitna deti hai, right?
Correct. It's exactly that, right? But it's important. The growing needs of a camera experience require you to have processors that are able to kind of deliver bokeh flare in a matter of seconds. It's a lot of work that's happening on the background, and so processors obviously need to be a lot more capable than they were even 3, maybe 4 years back. So that's really the third element. The fourth one is design. And there's this really popular saying about how your phone, when you go into a bar or you visit someone's house and you put your phone on the table, you're literally announcing to the rest of the crowd about what you stand for and who you are as a person. And so the element of design, both in terms of making a statement and expressing who you stand for, or what you kind of stand for as an individual, is one part. But the other part is also about the weight, the hand feel, the materials used, longevity of the device, durability. All of these are elements that we kind of think about when we speak of design. And then there's the experience element of design, which is the user interface, which again is super important given we are in the Android world, and there's very little to really distinguish yourself vis-a-vis other Android OEMs. So Android OEMs increasingly need to kind of have very focused efforts around how they're distinct in the design of the UI that you kind of deliver to consumers. So that's, I would say, the fourth part of what constitutes an amazing smartphone experience. And then what you refer to right now, right? Innovation's been fairly limited in the smartphone industry over the last few years. You can literally kind of think about the last big jump in terms of something transformational was losing the notch, so to speak. You just had like the Face ID. Losing the fingerprint was the last big innovation, but that was in 2017, right? And I think from there, the one big leap that the industry's taken is really been in the area of foldable displays, which are increasingly becoming very, very popular. We launched our first foldable device or flip device in India earlier this year. And it's really amazing about how easily consumers shift to something so unique, something so different, and something in your head so delicate, right? Imagine folding a glass case like literally over 400,000 times and feeling confident enough to make it your daily driver. So that we feel is another really amazing new segue in the smartphone industry. And then I think that the last couple of ones would be around just the display quality in terms of, we consume a lot of content now. Streaming platforms literally rely on people consuming a hell of a lot of content every day. And so the screen experience and so the evolution of the screens has been something which is important. And we've pioneered, obviously, implementing several innovations in this area as well. So I would say these are the top 5 or 6 things that really are interesting from an OPPO standpoint.
It is interesting that you spoke about design and you brought up the flip, or the foldable format. Because see, I'm old enough to remember a phone called the N1, which was basically OPPO's entry into the India market, and it blew me because at that point they had solved the problem of the selfie camera by making the camera rotate.
Correct.
So instead of having two cameras, you had one great camera which could face both sides. It could be front facing and it could be back facing.
Yes.
But my perception of Oppo as a brand was set in those initial days, because so this was where at a point when, after Apple, I thought Oppo was the most premium brand. But I'm talking about 10 years ago. I'm talking about 2013. When Oppo came in, it had, like, even the box was so premium.
Yeah.
The look and feel, what we used to call the idea of the phone itself was so unique. I just want to ask you, how important is the premium segment for Oppo right now? Because I hear a lot of companies talking about it, but the fact is there are not a lot of players in that space, right?
Yeah.
And with a foldable phone in your kitty now, do you think that that this is now a big opportunity for you?
Absolutely. And the premium segment, depending on how you define it, there's one definition which is anything above $300, right? Because so I mean, I won't.
No, I'm talking about maybe $1,000 plus, right?
$1,000, right?
So in that, ultra premium industry.
So say, for example, $800 for argument's sake, right? Because that's where the iPhone, etc. come in, right? So in our heads, Rajgopal, we're looking at it in two ways. One is obviously innovation that's driven from a design standpoint with the foldable displays, right? To begin with, to be able to create a foldable device that feels, looks, and behaves the way our Find N2 Flip behaves, for us is an extraordinary engineering achievement, right? And whether it's about the invisible crease experience, or is it about the battery experience of, this phone truly in our heads is a daily driver, which means this is not something that you carry just because it's great to look at, but it's also a device that you can rely on to kind of do everything that you need to do with a normal phone, a normal bar phone. So for us, this has been an amazing journey, because we've not jumped at the opportunity of being the first in the market. We've waited. We've made sure that this was the best flip in the market. So when we launched, it kind of just ticked a lot of boxes, whether it was the invisible crease, whether it was the super whoop fast charging, or it was about the camera experience. Everything just came together beautifully on this device. And so when we made the entry, or when we said, we are ready to kind of really get into the premium segment, we wanted to do it with a device that we felt would make a niche for itself, right? Because, in this segment, you cannot beyond a point push. Consumers need to love your product for what it represents. Consumers need to kind of appreciate the beauty of the device that's being put out, and the experience that it delivers, and things kind of happen from there, right? So the model of how you behave and act in the premium segment is very, very different to what it is, for argument's sake, in the entry price and the mid segments. So for us, our sense of confidence and belief in setting foot in the premium segment came on the back of an amazing product, because we felt this product truly represented the future of what Oppo wants to stand for as a brand. And we felt it was in a segment that was increasingly, being embraced by consumers in India. So this whole foldable device story for us was actually the perfect opportunity, because it's not really a crowded market. We have a couple of brands that have kind of come in after. So it really allows you to tell your story in your terms, so to speak. You're not fighting the speeds and feeds narrative here. You're really kind of talking about the aesthetics and the beauty and the engineering of the product. So it's an interesting segment. It's an exciting product category, and we feel very, very confident of being able to really kind of plant a flag and grow in this segment.
If you talk about the India market, how challenging is it to sort of figure out what next, right? Like, because you have a very value conscious customer, you have people who are always demanding more. So how do you cater to that market, especially when you are marketing for maybe a very young audience too, right? This is one of the youngest countries out there still. So how do you think about it? What do you sell them technically?
Yeah, it's interestingly, the market tells you enough on what it wants, right? And your own journey as a tech firm, as a firm that's investing deeply into research, etc., gives you another path, right? And so I think there's a path which you take because of your vision as a company and as a brand, where you feel this is what we feel should represent a tech experience for consumers. And basis the multiple billions that we invest in R&D, we create something that we feel is going to have a meaningful place in people's lives. And so there's product that we create with the intent of introducing something new into consumers' lives. And then there is stuff that you just kind of know from consumers that they're looking for based on interactions with them, based on research, based on just the reading of the market. And so if I was to kind of give you a little bit more detail on these two paths, the first one obviously is driven by R&D and just visionary thinking, right? It could be a foldable device, it could be a rollable device, it could be a flipping device, it could be a folding device. There are tons of things that kind of happen in that area. And from time to time, these garage projects, if I may call them that, tend to get commercialized and introduced into the market. It doesn't happen all the time, but there are products that kind of see the light of day based on investments that you make from an R&D standpoint. And then there is products that you create based on consumer needs. Now, they might not always articulate these needs to you, but it's what you read of how they're kind of consuming our products and what's really driving their purchase. So if I was to give you a few examples on how, for example, these smartphone markets evolved in the last 3 years, for argument's sake, because the pandemic was, a true inflection point in how we built products as well. During the period before the pandemic, a lot of people in India were kind of on their first, maybe the second smartphone device, right? And they essentially came into the segment on the back of fairly cheap, low-end, not very capable smartphones, right? And then when the pandemic hit, the usage of these phones skyrocketed in terms of the amount of time you were spending on them, right? And so what you judged a smartphone for prior to the pandemic transformed in the way you saw smartphones as consumers. You saw smartphones during and after the pandemic. And so some of the things that you would have compromised on earlier with regard to screen, with regard to charging, with regard to battery life, all of these things became extremely important to you because your usage of the smartphone became a lot more intensive. And so if I talk to you about just the way the industry has evolved, the average selling price of a smartphone today is at about 17,500 rupees. Depending on who you listen to, it's 17 to 18,000 rupees. Right? 2 years back, this was about 12,500, 13,000 rupees. Right? And it's a pretty significant, if you talk about averages,
it's a $50 jump, right?
It's a $50 jump, and you're talking about 160 million devices. So, it's a massive shift that's happened, and what we're seeing also is the growth's not coming from your sub 10,000 product line. It's happening in the 15 to 30,000 segment, right? And so what's happening now is we're seeing slowly the market maturing, consumers becoming a lot more, I would say, value conscious, not in saying I want something cheap, but value conscious in saying I'm willing to pay more, but what do I get for that? And does it compare to what my expectation is from the ideal smartphone experience, right? What that's kind of driven is innovation like SuperVOOC, right? SuperVOOC is a patented or is a trademarked OPPO tech, which allows you to really fast charge your phone, right? It's about like you can literally today charge the Reno 10, which is one of our flagships, flat out to 100% in 28 minutes, right?
Okay.
So even if you've not charged your phone overnight, just imagine the experience of just kind of charging it, changing for the day, and your phone's ready to go for the entire day, right? So that's been one innovation. So around battery, around fast charging. The other, like I spoke to you, the screen. The fact that you're consuming so much more content on the screen, streaming content on the screen, means that you cannot give a suboptimal screen experience either, right? The third one is people, when they're spending more, they're also demanding, in the best interest of the money that they're spending, they're looking at devices that last longer, right? And what that means is, are the phones being able to kind of be optimal in the way they perform for a longer period of time? So they're looking for OS updates, which are like longer than what they used to get in the past.
Yes.
Right. So there are the expectations of how people are spending money has evolved because you're talking to a consumer who's increasingly more mature in the choices that they're making. And they're not kind of, getting swayed by an offer at channel. They're getting swayed by what the experience is and whether the device that they're buying is future proofed. Will it last them longer? Right. So these are some of the things that, are happening from a product standpoint, purely based on how consumers are using the products.
Artificial intelligence is nothing really new for a smartphone, right? It's been there for a while. You guys have been playing with it for something as simple as fixing your selfie, right? But do you think that given that artificial intelligence and AI has become such a big buzzword in everybody's head, do you think it is necessary to make it maybe more central to our device now?
Yeah, look, AI has been at work behind the scenes for a
Yes.
fairly long time, right?
Yeah.
And AI really is the secret weapon of our devices, because it really kind of uplifts the user experience, whether it's predictive text, or anything else. Smartphones wouldn't be half as productive as they are with AI, right? So for us, integrating AI into the camera experience is at basic levels been happening for a very long time. But now, we're using AI increasingly in, like you said, photography, for example, where, it's no longer the hardware of the phone that's driving the quality of the images that are coming out. Is the quality of the AI and the engineering that's kind of going into the product from a software standpoint that's delivering image quality and picture quality. And one of the things about photography experiences on smartphones is, because AI is playing an increasingly important role, brands are creating devices that represents their point of view on what a perfect picture should look like, right? And so there are brands that feel, I want to make it as natural as possible. There are other brands that feel, I want to kind of elevate and improve the image in one way. There are other brands like for example, we've taken a bet on, say, for example, telephoto portrait imagery, right? We feel that's an experience that we want to kind of introduce in the mid-segment phones, which hasn't been available in the industry in the past. And so, brands are taking shots at creating amazing photography experiences using AI, which, in the past was only possible with really high-end DSLR devices, or with really high-end smartphones. So what AI has really enabled us to do is, what we said, it's democratized high-end phone capabilities in the mid and the lower segments as well. So, usage of AI is actually baked into how smartphones are being made now.
If you look at the biggest pain point like smartphone users had, maybe it was the battery, and you guys have solved it to a certain extent, right? You now have bigger batteries which are thinner, which means you have maybe a 5,000 to 6,000 mAh battery in a smartphone without the smartphone looking like a brick. And you also have supercharging like you guys have, and you've had it for a few years now, right? So are there other pain points in the smartphone segment that we should think you still need to solve?
I think the big pain point really is what I referred to a little while earlier, is how we unlock 5G on the smartphone, right? The 5G experience on a smartphone right now, fair enough, you can download a full movie from a streaming platform in seconds instead of minutes. But that's not necessarily leveraging the power of what 5G stands for, right? So I think for me,
it is installed capacity now, right? Like you have the installed capacity, you don't know what to do with it.
Correct. So for me, I think that's the one big thing. I think from a hardware standpoint, otherwise there will be iterative changes that will kind of continue happening. But the truly transformational thing will be when you suddenly realize that there is a 5G and a 4G experience that feels immensely different on a smartphone. And I think that's for me the big to-do on our lists as smartphone brands.
Is that basically a hardware problem to solve, or is it something where it is more about an experience, right? What experience would you fuel using the 5G, right? Like
I don't think,
and of course we have seen a lot of those experiences, but in bigger screens or more immersive environments, but not really on a 6-inch screen.
Correct. So I think it's not a hardware solve, Nandagopal. And again, if I had the answer, I'd probably be a billionaire right now, which I'm not. But I think it's a bit of both. I think there's going to be an extra device. It's going to be a smartphone plus something.
That's
going to kind of give you that experience. But that plus something, there have been experiments. There's been glasses, AR glasses, etc. But nothing has kind of worked yet, right? We've had a fund from another brand in the last few months. But again, I don't see anyone, wearing like these big ski goggles and roaming around the streets either, right? That plus one device with a smartphone that unlocks 5G and magically kind of transforms the experience of 5G is, I think, what our next big thing from an industry standpoint will be.
Thank you, Damyant. No, it's great to have you on the show and again get a lot more insight on what's happening and what maybe we should expect or not expect. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you.
So you were listening to Damyant Khanoria from OPPO. We'll be back again next week with another guest, lot more knowledge. Till then, our podcast is available everywhere you listen to your podcasts.